3 hours. That's how long coaches, staff, and leadership were reportedly locked behind closed doors at a Team USA basketball camp that was supposed to be routine. No cameras, no drama. Just another day of controlled scrimmages as the program quietly builds toward the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. But somewhere between drills, a single name was penciled onto a different lineup card: Caitlin Clark, starting rotation. And according to multiple sources who were actually in that gym, the entire energy shifted instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Players tracked every movement on the floor like the air itself had gotten heavier. Then, phones were shut off, doors closed, and what was supposed to be a forgettable practice session turned into an emergency meeting that exposed questions Team USA has been avoiding for months. Here's what we know for certain. By the time those doors reopened, nothing had been announced publicly. No starting lineup released, no statements issued. Officially, nothing happened. But privately, everyone in that building felt it. The moment Team USA realized this next era might not slide into place as smoothly as planned. And if you've been following the Caitlin Clark effect all season, watching how her presence alone bends defenses, changes ratings, and forces entire systems to adapt, you were onto something when you noticed the tension building. Because this isn't just about basketball skills. It's about gravity, the kind that doesn't ask permission. If you believe the story behind the story matters, that understanding power dynamics is just as important as box scores. Hit that like button. It tells us you're here for the real analysis, not just the highlights. Let's filter out the noise and understand what actually happened. This wasn't some viral shouting match. There was no meltdown, no dramatic confrontation that you'd see clipped across social media. What made this moment so uncomfortable was precisely how quiet it was. Because when a hierarchy shifts, even subtly, you can't unsee it. And Team USA's hierarchy, built carefully over decades of dominance, just got tested in a way that has coaches, veterans, and rising stars, all trying to figure out what comes next. The context matters here. This camp represents the beginning of a new 4-year Olympic cycle. Paris 2024 is done. That chapter is closed. Every rep happening now is being evaluated through a 2028 lens. Who fits long-term? Who can scale up when the pressure arrives? Who defines the next version of dominance? These aren't casual pickup games. They're auditions for the biggest stage in basketball, and everyone in that gym knows it. For Caitlin Clark, this is unfinished business. Not long ago, she was on the outside looking in easy, watching Olympic roster announcements, knowing her name wouldn't be called. The explanation at the time was experience, timing, roster construction. But anyone paying attention could see the deeper truth. When you play a style that disrupts systems rather than fitting neatly into them, when you demand the ball in ways that challenge established pecking orders, you become a decision that programs have to make. Not just a player they can plug in. That decision is now unavoidable. Clark didn't just show up to this camp as another talented guard hoping for minutes. She arrived as someone who fundamentally changes how offenses operate. 30-foot range that warps defensive schemes before the ball even crosses half court. Court vision that punishes teams for helping too aggressively. A pace that doesn't wait for structure, it creates it. That's not a skill set you hide on the bench or manage with limited possessions. It's a gravitational pull that every other player has to orbit around. And that's where the discomfort starts. Because Paige Bueckers is in that same gym, another generational talent, another face of the sport, another player who has spent her entire basketball life being the system, not fitting into one. For her, this camp wasn't just a test of rotations. According to people familiar with the situation, it was a moment that demanded adaptation in a way she'd never been asked to before. When you've built your identity around controlling the game, being asked to share that control, or worse, adjust your role to complement someone else's gravity, that's a psychological shift that goes way beyond X's and O's. Many of you have been pointing this out for weeks. The women's game is moving through a transition where basketball value and brand gravity are no longer separable. Impact isn't just measured in points and assists anymore. It's measured in who draws the world's eyes, who shifts ratings, who makes the sport feel bigger than it was yesterday. Pretending that doesn't matter, that Team USA can just evaluate talent in a vacuum like it's still 2012, that's no longer realistic. The challenge facing the coaching staff is almost paradoxical. The talent pool has never been deeper. Guards who could be franchise centerpieces anywhere else are competing for the same oxygen. Wings who dominate entire leagues are now asked to defend, screen, and in space. Bigs who feast on touches are told to control possessions without ever hearing their name called in a play. On paper, it's a luxury problem. In reality, it's a pressure cooker. Because everyone in that gym has the resume to justify feeling central. Everyone has sacrificed. Everyone has earned their place. And now they're being asked to redefine what their place actually means. That's why when Caitlin Clark's name appeared on that starting rotation card, it wasn't just a coaching decision. It was a signal, a statement about direction, about whether this program continues to lean on balance and tradition or adapts to a reality where certain players naturally tilt the floor, the audience, and the conversation. Those aren't easy choices, especially when dominance doesn't survive on talent alone. It survives on hard conversations, uncomfortable adjustments, and a willingness to redefine roles before the world forces you to do it on a much bigger stage. Reading between the lines of what's been reported, this emergency meeting wasn't about resolving the tension. It was about acknowledging it exists, about recognizing that the old rhythm can't hold when talent arrives this fully formed, this influential. The hierarchy hasn't been rewritten yet, but the ink is hovering. And everyone involved, players, coaches, veterans who've carried this program through previous cycles, they all felt the ground start to move. What happens next isn't about picking sides. It's about understanding that the women's game is entering a very different era than the one that came before. Let's talk about what this means for the actual decisions being made right now. Because here's where speculation meets reality. And we need to be transparent about what we know versus what sources are whispering about. Drop a comment below with your take. Do you think Team USA should build around Caitlin Clark's gravity? Or preserve the balance that's won them gold for decades? This is the conversation the program is having behind closed doors, and your perspective matters because this affects how the sport evolves. We're getting into rumor territory now, but multiple sources suggest several paths are being quietly discussed. On the calm, methodical end of the spectrum, the staff could do what elite programs have done for decades: slow everything down, sit in the discomfort, talk it through. That might mean staggered rotations where responsibilities are crystal clear. One player initiates when another sits. One becomes the focal point against specific lineups. Minutes fluctuate, but purpose doesn't. Everyone knows when they matter and how they matter, even if their role doesn't mirror what they're used to back home. There's also the possibility of reframing expectations entirely. Reports suggest the idea of hybrid roles has already come up in conversations. Lineups where multiple creators share the floor, but with defined lanes rather than shared chaos. One becomes the tempo setter, another becomes the closer. That requires trust on both sides and a willingness to let go of instinctive habits that have been rewarded for years. It's doable, but it's demanding. And not every player is wired to thrive in that kind of ambiguity. Then there's the more difficult outcome that nobody openly roots for, but everyone quietly acknowledges exists. Sometimes the fit just isn't right at that moment. That doesn't mean failure. It doesn't mean someone lost. It means timing and priorities didn't align. A player could choose to step away from camp to focus on the grind waiting back in the WNBA, or the staff could decide that preserving chemistry requires a different combination altogether. Those decisions are rarely dramatic in the room, but they echo loudly outside it. From the player's perspective, the math is deeply personal. Is wearing USA worth sacrificing autonomy? Is chasing gold worth fewer on-ball reps? Is adapting to a role that doesn't reflect your resume a temporary challenge or a long-term compromise? For some, that answer is easy. For others, especially with bodies, careers, and contracts in mind, it's a much heavier calculation. And here's the part that gets lost in all the speculation. None of this is about bad behavior. According to what's been said, no one crossed lines. No one demanded anything. The tension exists because excellence is colliding, not because professionalism disappeared. That distinction matters. It's the difference between dysfunction and growing pains. What we're witnessing is the natural friction that happens when the game shows you what it wants to become, and you have to decide whether you're willing to let it. The women's basketball landscape has fundamentally shifted. The spotlight is brighter. The fan bases are louder. The business side is no longer background noise. Players walk into these camps carrying not just years of development, but brands, expectations, and entire communities projecting onto them. Connecting the dots reveals something deeper. This isn't just about Team USA navigating egos or managing minutes. It's about an entire sport grappling with what happens when one player's gravity becomes so undeniable that traditional balance can't contain it. The WNBA saw it all season. Arenas that were half empty for years suddenly selling out. Ratings spiking whenever Clark touched the court. Rivalries forming not because of trash talk, but because her presence made every game feel consequential. Now that same gravitational pull is showing up in a USA basketball camp. And the system that's won gold for decades is being asked a question it's never had to answer before. Do you maximize your ceiling by building around disruptive talent, even if it means making uncomfortable roster decisions? Or do you preserve harmony and tradition, knowing you might be leaving your best weapon on the table? The online firestorm around this situation isn't just noise. It's a reflection of the larger transition happening in real time. Fans are divided not because they don't understand basketball, but because they're watching two equally valid philosophies collide. Some believe team success requires everyone checking their ego at the door, fitting into defined roles, trusting the system that's proven it works. Others see a once-in-a-generation talent and argue that playing it safe is how you end up with silver instead of gold. Both sides have merit. That's what makes this so complicated. But here's what we can't ignore. When Diana Taurasi was in her prime, Team USA built around her. When Sue Bird was running point, the offense flowed through her vision. Dominance has always required centering certain players, not distributing everything equally. The question isn't whether star power matters, it's whose star power gets prioritized and why. For veterans who've sacrificed quietly while the sport was fighting for visibility, the surge of attention around one figure can feel less like opportunity and more like displacement. Not because they lack confidence, but because the ground beneath them is clearly shifting. That's a valid feeling. It's also an inevitable part of generational transitions. The hard part is navigating it without resentment, without burning bridges, and without pretending the discomfort doesn't exist. What reportedly happened in that gym, the 3-hour emergency meeting, the closed doors, the weight everyone felt when it ended, that wasn't a crisis. It was recognition. Recognition that certain styles of play don't just fit into systems, they reshape them. And when that happens, the hardest part isn't adjusting tactics, it's asking elite competitors to adjust identity, to redefine how they matter without erasing who they've been. Whatever direction this goes, one thing already feels settled. This conversation doesn't fade when camp ends. It will resurface in future invites, in rotations, in high-stakes games where decisions have to be made quickly and publicly. The groundwork being laid now, in quiet rooms and long conversations, that's what will define how this era of Team USA basketball sees itself. Whether the program leans fully into its most disruptive strengths, or deliberately balances them at the risk of limiting the ceiling. That choice won't just shape a roster. It will signal how willing the system is to evolve as the game around it accelerates. Because once the game shows you what it wants to become, your only choice is whether you're ready to embrace it or spend the next 4 years wondering what could have been. If this kind of analysis is what you're here for, the kind that goes beyond highlights and digs into the real power dynamics shaping the sport, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're tracking every development as Team USA builds toward 2028, and the next chapter of this story is going to be fascinating. Next up, we're breaking down what Angel Reese's latest comments reveal about the league's response to all this attention, and why her perspective might be the most underrated take in this entire conversation. The hierarchy hasn't been rewritten yet, but after that day, after those 3 hours behind closed doors, everyone walked out knowing the ink was hovering. The shift didn't announce itself with noise, but it didn't need to. Once you feel that kind of movement, you can't pretend the floor is steady anymore. And whatever comes next, whether it's seamless adaptation or growing pains, the questions raised in that gym aren't going away. They'll show up again under brighter lights, louder crowds, and higher stakes. And when they do, everyone involved will remember the moment they realized the ground had already started to move.